Hi class. We are going to look at one problem. It's fairly long as an example of the homework for this week. So this one has to do with a Morrow manufacturing company. They make water heaters. We've got some balances here and they don't tell us debit or credit. We've just got some balances. We've got some inventory data and it says we're going to do a cost of goods manufactured and an income statement. And this problem is really long, so the best advice I can give you is to find a picture of these statements on it in your textbook and kind of follow along with them as a template. This video is a little bit different because I actually have a finished problem because it just takes forever to put in each of these things. So I thought this might speed it up a little bit, but I wanted to at least hit the high points and tell you how to do this statement of cost of goods manufactured. All right, so yours is, and see it is fairly long, yours is going to have pretty much a blank template. We're going to start with a work in process inventory, and that's going to be at the beginning of the year. We're going to add in our raw materials, our direct labor, our overhead, and then we're going to take out our ending inventory. So this kind of works like our same formula for the cost of goods sold. Take your beginning inventory, add your purchases, less your ending inventory. So kind of that same pattern. The inventory amounts, the work in process inventory comes off of this little chart, and just pay attention to the dates, make sure you pull the right one. So this one's the $40,000. Excuse me. The next thing we're going to do is start with our raw materials. And we're going to start with our raw materials inventory at the beginning of the year, which is also in the chart. The next thing we're going to do is add our material purchases. And then we're going to take away our raw materials at the end of the year. And this one's off of that little chart I just showed you with the inventory data. The purchases are actually up here at the top, right there. Just going to bring that straight down. So when you get your, we've got our beginning inventory and our purchases, that gives us our materials available. We're going to subtract out our ending materials, and that's going to actually tell us how much in raw materials we used. Direct labor is just one line, and that's on that first chart, so you just plug that in. And then manufacturing overhead, and we've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, looks like 9 things. All of these are on this chart up at the top. So let's see, we've got, there's the direct labor, which was right up above that. You're going to start with the indirect labor, and all this stuff that says it has to do with the factory, that all goes in this section. So you got indirect labor, and then payroll taxes for factory, utilities for factory. This one actually is labeled indirect supply, so that goes in there too. All of this factory stuff goes in that section. You just take those amounts down. Once you get to the sales salaries, sales doesn't have to do with manufacturing, so you can stop there. The rest of this is information we're going to use later. So once you get all this amount plugged in, all these amounts from the chart, that's going to give you your total manufacturing overhead, which is just the total of all those things. Your total manufacturing cost is your materials, your direct labor, and your overhead. So let's see. There's your materials used, there's your direct labor, and your overhead. So add those three together. Your work in process for the year is your manufacturing cost plus that beginning work in process, and then you're going to subtract out the ending work in process. And the ending work in process inventory is on the little inventory chart right there. And that's going to give you, I'm sorry, let's see, our total work in process for the year less our ending inventory gives us a cost of goods manufactured. So that's kind of our bottom line for that one. So that's the process you're going to do for the cost of goods manufactured statement. The next thing you're going to do is an income statement. And we did one of those in the last chapter, so this one's similar. So we're not going to go through this whole entire thing line by line. But you've got your section up here with your your revenue, and that's up in the top chart. Your cost of goods sold, your inventory amounts, there's your beginning inventory, your ending inventory, that's on the little inventory chart. This is different. There's your cost of goods manufactured, and that actually comes from what you just did. Down here at the bottom. So there's that $554,000. That carries over to the income statement right there. So then you're going to fill out the rest of your cost of goods sold section. We've got operating expenses and administrative expenses. So, I'm sorry, we got operating expenses that consist of selling expenses and administrative expenses. So the selling expenses are a little bit weird. If you come up here, we stopped at sales salaries. Well, sales salary sounds like a selling expense. And then, of course, payroll taxes associated with that would also be a selling expense. Delivery expense is considered a selling expense. Sometimes companies offer delivery as kind of a perk to sell stuff, so that's the reason behind that. Advertising, of course, is a marketing or selling expense. That one's labeled selling. So those right through there are your selling expenses. And then starting with officer salary and office supplies or office salaries, payroll tax expenses for administration and other administrative expenses. Those four go right here in administrative expenses, which they all kind of sound administrative-ish. And then the only one you're going to have left is that income. Let's see, here's our income tax expense. That's that last one. So this one looks a whole lot like the income statement on this chapter looks a whole lot like the one in the last chapter. So I don't think you'll have any problem with this one if you're able to wade through the last chapter. But if you do, as always, feel free to send me an email and I'll help you if I can.